And Russian forces are closing in on Kyiv with skirmishes dotting the outskirts of the Ukrainian capital. Some of the fighting suggests that smaller Russian units are attempting to carve a path for the larger main force, now standing less than 20 miles from the city's center. I want to bring in ABC News national security and defense analyst Mick Mulroy and ABC News contributor, former deputy director of the Counterterrorism Center of the CIA, Daryl Blocker, for more on this. Mick, I'd like to start with you. A senior U.S. official told ABC News today that some Russian forces are disoriented and are realizing this is much harder than they thought, but also that every indication is Russians have given that the Russians gave about wanting to initiate diplomatic talks is just buying themselves time to resupply. So what do you think is working for the Russian military? What isn't working for them? And same question for the Ukrainian defense forces.
So I do think that it's very clear that we, the Western intelligence agencies, had this down to a T. We knew exactly what they were going to do. But the one factor the Russians didn't take into account was the tenacity and, quite frankly, the bravery that the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian population has exhibited in the face of this overwhelming enemy. It's unlikely, unfortunately, that it will stop the onslaught of the Russian invasion. They are dwarfed by the military capacity of the Russians, but I do think that's what caused this delay. As far as the diplomatic effort, I think it's now very clear that Russia has used diplomacy as a ruse in order to prepare for and eventually launch this assault. I do think we should keep diplomatic channels open. Anything to stop this level of violence against the civilian population is worth trying, but we have to be very hesitant in anything that the Russians have to say.
All right. And Daryl, Germany is providing 1,000 anti-tank weapons and 500 portable surface-to-air missiles to Ukraine. And this is a significant shift in Germany's position. So how important, one, is that shift, and two, are these weapons?
Well, the anti-tank missiles are essentially bazookas with a 80 to 120-foot range. So they will impact how the tanks are employed, which means it'll impact how the infantry coming after the tanks are employed. And whether it's in the hands of the Ukrainian military, militia, or even newly trained and newly formed militia groups, it's not very difficult to fire the anti-tank missiles. Now, on the surface-to-air missile front, the Russians know full well that if they can't control the airspace, they can't control the ground either. And 33 years ago this month, surface-to-air missiles were significant in pushing them out of Afghanistan.
So, Mick, what kinds of tactics do you think is the Ukrainian army employing to try to do their best to stand toe-to-toe with this much larger, better-trained Russian force?
Well, Daryl's exactly right. These weapon systems, these javelins, which are the anti-tank systems, these Stinger missiles, which are the anti-aircraft missiles, are an exponential factor on the battlefield. So the more we can get them these type of weapons, the more they can resist, not just the invasion, but also in what I think is for sure going to be one of the fiercest insurgencies we've ever seen when this invasion is over and the occupation takes place. So they have used these weapons to great effect. But it's not just the weapon system, right? It's the fight in the soldier. And I think we've seen great examples of how much these individuals are willing to fight, including one Marine, Ukrainian Marine, detonating a bridge with himself on it to stop the forward advance of Russian forces. It is that willingness to fight, plus the support that they can get from NATO and the United States, that will make a difference in this fight.
And Daryl, what options are open for nations who want to help Ukraine without putting actual troops within its borders?
Well, I would always recommend to them that reach out to any of the NATO nations, reach out to any of the EU nations, reach out to any of the Five Eyes nations, because they would probably already have had some semblance of these discussions in the past, but they also might not want to reach the ire of the Soviets or the Russians after the fact. So they can do it quietly through existing channels. And I hope they all do step up. And they have been. Post 9/11 was a perfect example of countries who might not have been aligned with the United States or with the EU or NATO that all of a sudden coalesced and fought a greater evil.
And Mick, Russia has claimed time and time again that they're only targeting military infrastructure, but we've seen video of Ukrainian bridges, even apartments, getting hit with missiles. So is this intentional or is it incompetence?
So that's exactly the question. Is it intentional or incompetence? Either one is really bad. I don't have a way to independently verify the videos that you are referencing, but I've seen them. And it includes a Russian tank rolling over a car full of civilians with civilians inside, as well as these strikes on these apartments. These are unacceptable, and the U.S. and the international community needs to hold Russia to account for these obvious, if they are in fact correct, war crimes.
And Daryl, the U.S. has given $350 million worth of lethal defensive aid to Ukraine. How important do you think that will be in this conflict?
$350 million of weapon systems doesn't always equate to a lot, but what it does is significantly prove to the people on the ground that we are there with them, that we'll be there to support them, and this is just the first of hopefully a nonstop tranche of weapons that are going to be coming their way for as long as it takes to push the Russians back to the other side of the border.
All right, Mick Mulroy, Daryl Blocker, we appreciate the analysis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.